afternoon, everyone, and good morning, I should say, for Adrian and Maxim. I am absolutely delighted to introduce our guest speaker today. The last individual, or the last one-person guest talk of this term, Adrian Moise. He is the founder and CEO of Aequilibrium, a Canadian company providing technology consulting and implementation services, strategy, experience design, and tech. Aequilibrium was ranked among the top 5 digital agencies, fastest growing companies, and top exporters in BC, winner of multiple Vancouver UX Awards for digital product design. They help customers with digital transformation and innovation so they can become more resilient, differentiate, and grow. Adrian's international work experience includes e-health, gaming, for example, Ubisoft, Electronic Arts, product, Microsoft, Aequilibrium, and digital agency. Clients like Starbucks, Nintendo, Nike, BioWare, Michelin. Adrian holds an MSc from Polytechnica University in Bucharest, a PhD from Simon Fraser University, a postdoc in computer science from the University of British Columbia, and advanced executive education from Harvard and Wharton. I had the pleasure and the chance of meeting Adrian at the Credit Union Technology Forum held in Halifax in June, and he demonstrated his product, one of his products there in person, by putting me in a virtual classroom. And of course, I was absolutely delighted. So as I always do, I was like, oh, maybe you would be interested in talking to my students. And Adrian, being nice, as most people you've seen are in fintech and in the tech community at large, said, sure, let's keep in touch. So here he is from a coast to another. Welcome virtually to Dalhousie University, and thanks so much for being with us, Adrian.
Great, thank you for the introduction, Maria. It was a pleasure to be in Halifax a few months ago when we got to meet in person. We are actually at a fintech conference, and Aequilibrium was one of the presenters, and that's how we connected. We stay in touch, and I appreciate the opportunity to share my journey with the students at Dalhousie University. I'll move this along. So a few things about myself. So I'm, among other things, a gamer. My first job out of school was actually working for Ubisoft, which is the equivalent of Electronic Arts in Europe. So one of the largest gaming developers. And I mention this because this story about crafting remarkable and immersive gaming experience started more than 20 years ago. And I also had an opportunity to work with Electronic Arts. Why is it also particularly relevant is because it was another game-changing moment. At that time, the Nintendo DS, the Sony PlayStation Portable were coming up, and this idea of smartphones. So Electronic Arts, is the world's largest producer of video games, had this challenge to go from producing these experiences, these games on the large screen TVs, and now you have these small devices. And the idea was, how can we make this experience relevant? So the question was not how to take a game running on, a big screen TV and shrinking, 20 times to fit on a small device. It was to move away from the phone, the mobile devices being just another screen, and instead consider what is unique about these devices. How do we make these experiences more relevant? For example, this idea of portability on the go. People will carry their, mobile devices, their PlayStation Portable in their pockets, and they may be waiting for the bus, and then, or they would be at school or at work, and in between meetings, they will play the games for a few minutes. So the way they would engage on these devices would be different. So we did not want to basically do a port, of a game from the big screen TV to a mobile device. We thought about how can we reimagine the gaming experience on these devices. Why I'm spending time on this is because we are right now in front of another game-changing moment. For those of you who know this, Apple has announced a few months ago the launch of Apple Vision Pro. And the Apple CEO went on stage and said, hey, if you saw that the iPhone was a game changer, you should see how spatial computing is going to disrupt every industry we're in. So I'm excited to tell you a bit about both my journey as an entrepreneur, but also talk a bit about some of the work that we have been doing in terms of virtual reality. Yeah, talk a bit about my journey as an entrepreneur. So I started Equilibrium about 12 years ago. After working in the digital space, both in the agency side and in the product side for companies like Microsoft and McKesson Medical Imaging. So in a number of fields. And then I decided to move from a secure position, you know, as a leader of the delivery project management office and so on, to actually starting my own organization. And I did that pretty late. I understand that part of the interest in here is kind of looking for you as a student, what's open after you graduate? How do you continue to stay relevant? And what I'm finding, I seem to be fairly knowledgeable on this topic because I have two children your ages. My son has started at UBC this year in the science field, and my daughter is in the fourth year at Berkeley in California studying business. So both of them are university students, probably about your ages. And I'm thinking, and I'm, you know, privy to the type of question they ask themselves. How would the industry, how would the world change? How do we get prepared for this? Because part of the reason you get to get this education is to stay appraised and be ready for what's coming next. The challenge is, as humans, we are good at looking ahead in a manner that is linear. So predicting if this is kind of the norm right now, what would happen 1 to 5 years from now? When things change radically, when there is this disruption, the growth is exponential. Our ability to predict what's going to happen from 10 years from now is going to be significantly diminished. So with this in mind, how do you go and start a career, get this type of training, background education, and continue to remain relevant for what's happening? Especially when technologies like AI are coming in and there are these discussions about potentially millions of jobs that could be affected by AI. And they will be, but I believe that it will be a disruption that will cut two ways. One, some jobs, you know, that are less relevant could be replaced, but also millions of new jobs will be created in this new economy. So to wrap up the introduction about Equilibrium, because part of my entrepreneurial life is to find a niche in this busy space of digital agencies. And what we focus on is on building remarkable experiences. So we bring together strategy, experience, design, and technology, and then we solve complex business problems. So we are not a marketing agency. We don't do email campaigns. We don't do WordPress websites. We build some complex apps. For example, we chose a while ago to focus on financial services because when we looked at surveys, some research, and people were asked, what's top of mind for you? What is the biggest stressor in your life? This idea of money was a top concern. So we're looking to see how can we partner with progressive financial institutions to change people's relationship with money. So some of the apps you may have on your phone, because we've been working in financial services, building mobile apps for hundreds of credit unions in Canada, may be built by Equilibrium. So I'm going to jump into the main topic for us. You probably heard me using interchangeable the word XR, and there is VR. So what does it mean? What's the difference between one versus another? So I'll explain a bit, you know, the different types of realities. But the point here is why this is relevant is that even this presentation that I'm doing right now, using a tool like PowerPoint, is very old school, which has been happening for tens of years, and it hasn't evolved a lot. So what happens, I was on both sides as a student like you, but also I taught in the university. So what happens, you are getting taught, something is applied, it's happening to you. Much more interesting it would be when you get to be part of that experience. So as opposed to, imagine you have a physics class or a chemistry, and you're talking about atoms and then the electrons moving from one to another and ions being produced, and then these atoms combine into molecules. You can be one of those molecules and see how those things combine. So I love the physics experiments, but they don't happen very often because there is a lot of the preparation. You need to get the substances ready. You will need to take the students to avoid mixing things up in an incorrect order, because then something may blow up and so on. So there is a level of risk. Well, using things such as virtual reality, you can have these experiments as part of all your classes and make these memorable experiences, getting to actually see how these reactions taking place, as opposed to just being told how these are happening. So I was mentioning again the spectrum of experience, the spectrum of reality. And you see, obviously, the reality that you experience with your eyes when you look around you and you see people and, the university offices and streets and so on. Then you have something which is called augmented reality. So in which you basically create an improved augmented experience by looking into what's happening in real life, plus this extra information. Imagine some metadata. You're looking at on the street, on Google Maps, you are in a new city, new country, and you're looking for like, okay, I'm hungry, where are the restaurants? And then which are open now? And what kind of food do they have? Virtual reality is something that is completely imaginary. It's being created from scratch and then transport you in a net new world. So you basically, the entire field of view is replaced, is like you're seeing this screen on your headset, and the experience that you transported in is completely controlled and built from scratch. The mixed reality is when the augmented and the virtual reality are coming together. So for example, you can use a mixed reality headset. You apply the headset on, and then you scan, let's say, the room, the class where you are, and the device will recognize the shapes. This is the table, a chair, a bed, and so on. And now you can play a game in which, I don't know, you're going to shoot some monsters, and these monsters will come in by what? Making a hole in your ceiling or coming down from your stairs. So you get to see this type of immersive game reality while it is anchored into what your current location looks like. All right, we'll probably skip the polling for now. We wanted to use Slido, but I'll see how we're moving in terms of we progressing with this presentation, and I'll offer some interactivity later at the end. So there is this term about metaverse, and without making an assumption of how much do you know about it, I'm going to provide a definition. I don't think there is a standard or a proof or like this is the definition, because nobody really owns the metaverse. It's something that's still emerging. But the way I see this is when we moved from brochures, oh, you want to learn about us, our company, and so on, I will come in and leave, a piece of printed media with you. And then the next step was, well, the so-called web or internet was invented. So now I create a website, which is kind of my brochure, but in a digital format. The metaverse takes this to the next level, in which this is mostly an interactive 3D and social environment. So you can go, for example, as opposed to go to the website of a mall and say, hey, what stores are in there? Who has a sale? I can see a map so I can get oriented where my store is. But you leave no trace to that website. You visit it and then it stays the same. So a new person comes in and sees the same thing. In the metaverse, if there was a destination like a mall, you will go there and you will basically be able to explore the store and interact with people and leave a footprint. You actually can make a purchase, or you can go sit at the table and chat with people. You can try things on. So many are looking at the metaverse as the evolution of the internet. And companies like Citi are hailing this as a potentially $13 trillion a year opportunity, especially with Apple coming in and saying, this is our next big bet, spatial computing, in which you can wear this device and then be immersed into these other worlds, including if you want to work, you can choose to have an unlimited amount of screens of different sizes and so on. So as opposed to being limited to your two-dimensional screen, now you can have an infinite amount of information around you at your fingertips. In terms of the evolution, so some of the first devices came in as early as the 2000s, and we see that more and more this picked up speed, and then especially in the last few years, especially with the acquisition of Facebook at that time, now Meta, of Oculus, a lot of new devices have been produced, and Facebook, Meta in particular, is the dominant hardware provider with the Quest. Quest 2 is by far the best-selling headset, and earlier this year, Apple Vision Pro has launched the Apple Vision Pro in June this year. They launched it, but something that's, again, a very unique approach. Typically, when Apple launches a new product, hey, and we have a new iPhone or a new Mac or a new iPad, they announce it today, and then 2 weeks later, you can go to the store, start purchasing this. In this particular instance, the Apple Vision Pro will not be actually available for sales for another year or so. But why did the Apple change their strategy of not making a product available right away? Because they knew the product is not ready. They still have a lot of work to do, but they really wanted to tell the world, hey, a new channel is coming up. And this concept of spatial computing is going to disrupt every space we are in. I have a lot of these devices here, so I'm not sure that in my camera, do I have a background, or if I can show you some example of some devices. So let me try to see. So this device is an Oculus 2. And in comparison, this is the recently released Oculus 3. So this is the newest and probably the most advanced device. So this is the Oculus 2. And then this is the Oculus 3. And so this is a mixed reality device that was just launched a couple of weeks ago. And I am impressed by how much extra power and innovation Meta has put in this device while keeping it at a low cost. A device like this costs $250. So it's actually significantly cheaper than your, gaming console like the Xbox or, the Sony console. Speaking about Sony, Sony had also launched the second generation of the VR headset. This is called Sony PlayStation VR 2. And what you need to notice about this is compared to the other two devices, which were wireless, this one is actually tethered. It has this long cable that connects this device to the Sony PlayStation console, because one of the aspects with these devices is that they have to realize several functions. They need to basically act as a screen, through basically projecting on those glasses, and create an impression of the environment they want to create. But it's also the processing power. And then there is also the battery. So there is a matter of like how much horsepower, how many computational capabilities do I put on the device? What are the implications in terms of how much battery I'm consuming? And then how much weight I put on my head, which most of us are not used to carry anything but, very thin glasses on our face, on our head. So there are these trade-offs, and how, for example, Sony chose to solve this problem. They made very thin glasses, and then the weight then on your face is reduced, but you have to be tethered because the processing is actually happening on the actual Sony console. I'll move on. By the way, throughout the presentation, I am unable to see your if there is a chat window and so on. So I actually can click on that and then see some of you started to put comments in there. I encourage you to put either comments or questions throughout the presentation, and I will do my best to address them either if it's relevant to that particular part of the presentation or towards the end of the presentation. So somebody mentioned about Pokemon Go. So yes, I was probably talking at that point in time about augmented reality. You can take one of these devices on the field, and then you can be in a park, and then you can see these Pokemons and then collect them and so on. And some of these game producers are looking to see how do I get people out of their seats to move that from couch potatoes to actually get them to actually meet in person and socialize with other friends, and also go outside and consume fresh air. So a few ways in which this technology is applied. One concept is called the digital twin. I actually carry a t-shirt. I was at the conference earlier, and we had these t-shirts on about what is the concept of a digital twin. So let me do a quick poll in here, and please use the chat window. Is anyone familiar with the digital twin? And then if you are, how would you define that? So feel free to add your comments in the chat window. So one concrete example in Vancouver, the digitization of the Vancouver International Airport took place. So what does it mean? As you can see there on that screen, in the bottom right corner, so on one hand, you have the physical environment. You can look on the windows as a passenger or somebody who works at the airport and see the airplanes, the people, they are real, you can touch them. Through a digital twin and using all kinds of sensors and camera, in real life, you can actually scan and receive on your computer a digital version of the airport. How is that used? Well, once the information is digital, you can analyze and then figure out what is the process behind it. Why do I have so many planes on the tarmac waiting to take off? When they do that, the passengers are getting bored. And by the way, fuel is being burned and CO2 is going to the air. And then planes and airlines making money when people are up in the air and going from A to B, not when they're stuck on a time. Or what happens after you land and then there is no gate for you to go to because the gates are busy or you don't have enough people. Or once people are getting off the plane, what's the shortest path for them to go retrieve the luggages? So a lot of that information, now that is in digital format, can be analyzed. NVIDIA and BMW have created this partnership that I think BMW has about 20 or so factories. They started digitizing the BMW factories, starting with the most effective, highest production, highest productivity. So they're trying to figure out if we're producing, let's say, 100,000 cars in a factory per year, and this one is a top performer and produces 10% more. That's 10,000 extra cars coming from the same amount of people, the same type of effect. What's special about them? What's the secret sauce, and how can I apply that to the other 20 factories that I have? So some of these immersive experiences you are getting to enjoy and play with every day in gaming environments, but I'm going to talk about virtual reality and XR in general in a business context. So not just about, hey, this is a nice tool and then I can free roam and I see these environments, but I'm going to come from this perspective of how can this be used for a business, and then I'll talk about some of the scenarios that are particularly relevant for you. One is, okay, so if I'm starting here, how is that going to disrupt education? So I'll touch on that briefly, but also if you want to go into the workforce, especially right now in which companies are working at least partially remote, like us, we are connecting from all over the world into this conversation, how we can make these experiences better so companies receive a competitive advantage in attracting, retaining, and training their staff. So again, in the industry, we see that XR can be applied in many areas and many verticals. So areas such as training their staff in terms of visualizing bigger volumes of information. For optimizations, they can look into how can we simulate experiments, try things new, and then continue to improve. One area in particular passionate about is about Formula One. And the reason for that is because it's the epitome of speed, is where strategy, design, and technology come together. And in Formula One, they make some changes to basically reduce the gap between the team who had a lot of money, like Mercedes and Ferrari, to teams who have less endorsement and less budget to spend on developing their cars. So they cut the amount of time that the Formula One team have to go to take their cars on the real, track to test the cars, because they bring new parts and new accessories. How do they actually perform? So since that limitation happened in terms of the physical testing of the car with the new parts in the new different tracks and condition, then the teams have developed simulators. So they go and scan these racetracks at the millimeter using lasers to get the smallest bumps in the road perfectly, digitized. And then they create a virtual replica, a digital twin of the car. So drivers get to do many laps in this type of simulators before they get a chance to actually try the car on the tarmac. We'll talk a bit about these 3 R's around the remote workforce, recruitment and retentions, and then how companies can use their XR as a competitive advantage to build resilience. I really like this analogy from this person called Adam Grant. I don't know how many of you have heard about Adam. And when he was talking about this remote workforce, and they were saying how different people react to this so-called remote work, people conditions are different. So he came up with this metaphor about, when we work, our work is like sport, and there are different types of sports. There are sports such as, let's say, gymnastics, in which I can stay home, I can do some weightlifting, I can do some balancing and so on. Maybe I can have a floor where I can do some tumbles and so on. So I can do a lot of that stuff by myself. Another example of a competition is in these relays, in which, I need to do my own running, but there is a point in which there is a handover. I need to actually, in that particular defined moment of time, to synchronize with another team player. The third type of element is like My son, for example, he plays volleyball. You cannot just stay home, pass the ball, somebody in Halifax will go start to receive it, somebody else will set it up, another person from the competition will spike it from a different city and a different time. You really need everybody to be present in there for that game to take place. So using this metaphor, we recognize, okay, so the ability to come together at key moments and collaborate and work together changes depending your environment. And this is when I say workforce, take that interchangeable with what you're doing, which is education. What is the stuff in which you may be right now at home and listening to this class, and you are, you know, getting the same type of experience as somebody who's actually in the class. And then there are those lectures, there are those interactive workshops in which, you know, you actually need to be there in person to get the most out of the teaching experience. So there were a number of polls about companies looking into, hey, how AR and VR is working for you, and based on the experiments that you ran, what do you see the benefits? And then anywhere from increasing efficiencies to basically improving the employee experience. And then in particular, how we seeing this can make a difference. As an entrepreneur, when we move from a beautiful office in downtown Vancouver, which we consider, hey, we spend a lot of money to have this type of great experience. It's in a very convenient position in which people can come in from anywhere on the SkyTrain, on the actual train, on the sea bus, lots of restaurants about. So through that investment, it created a competitive advantage. We could go up, you know, for restaurants on Fridays, we are going to have some team events. So that's how culture used to take place when everybody was meeting in person. Now, if all of us have a laptop and a Zoom or Microsoft Teams screen, what does culture mean? And then what prevents somebody from, oh, it's just a Zoom screen and a paycheck, I'll just go where's the highest paycheck. So it puts the pressure on organization to figure out how do we differentiate and grow. My daughter, during her student years, has done a number of internships with Microsoft in Seattle, with PwC here in Vancouver. She would love to be present in person with the senior people to learn from osmosis, to, you know, be together, to co-create some of these solutions for the clients. For people who've been there for a while, it was convenient to just work from home, and then they knew who's who and how to get work done and so on. But it was certainly disadvantage for somebody new to get up to speed and become productive in the remote workplace. So we believe that in-person interactions are important. However, we also think that these type of Zoom or Microsoft Teams call do a poor job to bring people together and to enable collaboration and creativity. So we think VR and XR and the metaverse can help in all these areas listed in here. So for example, in terms of onboarding, I think at Deloitte, they have something called Cloud9, basically a digital twin, a replica of their main office. And irrespective of where you are, everybody spends the first week having an experience at the main office, but virtually. They get a headset and then they go to the office, and in that office, they meet other people, other newbies, new recruits who just joined, but also their boss, the HR person, whomever is giving them. And then everybody has that experience, but without having to travel. Training and education is going to be the bulk of the presentation, so I'm going to dive into that. So companies like Walmart, when we're talking about training their team, they actually have 30,000 headsets that they're using to train hundreds of thousands of people every year using virtual reality. So now, again, this is enterprise at scale. This is not for gaming. And we see here some example of how this is making a difference. So I'm going to pause here for a moment to figure out, okay, we want to move away from the phone, which revolutionized the world. It's just a small laptop. So we thought, like, what is unique in terms of the experiences we deliver for the phone? Oh, it's easy to text. Oh, social media. Oh, the iPhone is by far the single best, most frequently used camera in the world. So all these things, like you want to do banking, you can do it there. You want to cash a check? No, you don't have to go to the bank. You can take a photo of your check and then you can. So it transformed our lives. So similar here, we need to think about for these experiences, for this VR. VR is not just another screen, a very simple case study. Oh, I can watch Netflix on 3D. Sure, you can do that. It's another screen, it's a bigger screen, but that's not what the best experience you get from virtual reality. What you're getting, it's a multi-sensory experience. So our brain, for example, you heard about things such as Zoom fatigue. If you were to see all your faces on the screen, all those heads, all those eyes, our brain is wired to look at people's eyes because in the past it was like how to read intention, how to kind of read the room, how to be pleasant, how to change the conversation if it doesn't resonate, but also looking for a threat. So because of that, when you're looking at those Zoom screens, you are getting tired because without you knowing, your brain was permanently scanning for that facial impression. When I talk to somebody in real life, I face that person and I have one pair of eyes to scan. Now I may have 100 of you on the screen. It would have been terribly disruptive. Another thing that's unnatural. Similar, when I talk to a person, I face that particular person. You coming in and asking, or you have a side conversation, I hear from the right. You on the left side in close to me. All right, that's another example. In virtual reality, you have 3D sound. So if the 100 of us will be sitting into a large room amphitheater and Tom is going to be 3 meters to my left and then Elena will be 20 meters to the left, I would hear them differently depending on their location in this virtual world. And the last thing is disruptions and distractions. I don't know about you, but when I do my work, I may have a dozen tabs open. So a person may be supposedly in a meeting, supposedly doing multitasking, but actually not paying attention to what's being said. When we had those meetings in person and we wanted to get everybody, I wanted everybody to be focused to get the maximum productivity during a short meeting and then move on and do the rest of our job. Multitasking is not a tool for efficiency for human beings. It's a concept that was invented for computers. For human beings, being focused and getting the work done, maximum attention, maximum productivity, and then moving to the next task, it's actually a better way for people, for high-performing people to get results. So guess what? On your computer screen, you have all 50 tabs. You may be staring at me, but you're actually checking news or looking at Facebook updates. When you put the headsets on, that's all you can do. You're only in that meeting, you're either in or you're out. So again, focus on attention. So these are examples, the multisensory experience, the sound, the visual. Right now, you even have devices. So you go into a virtual reality and you are going to a bakery, you can smell the fresh baked goods. So you have a cartridge and then you can smell or freshly roasted coffee. So you have also sensors right now, not just this type of force feedback you have with your 3D gaming, Microsoft Xbox controller, but you can have gloves or even vests and so on, so you can have a full body experience when you are into virtual reality. Being, okay, so when you perform some of these operations and you want to make sure, okay, if I make this really realistic, you have some weight on you, or basically you need to avoid touching some areas, let's say dealing with the fire, and some of these areas can be hot and you want to really make sure that you're not touching those areas and so on. I have more stats in here. The point that I'm trying to make is when I started to learn about this, it felt like actually virtual reality is like the panacea. Faster, cheaper, more engagement. Not only you learn faster, but your confidence level to deploy, to apply those learning is higher. We discussed this idea about remote work. You heard about, the big resignations. There were periods of time in which finding people was terribly difficult and so on. So not only training people, but if your employees are more engaged and they are impacting the retention rate, that's another huge benefit for the HR team, because you know what? Nobody wants to train people and then they leave, because I just trained a person for my competition. So training makes sense from any perspective of an organization when, one, that training you can actually apply it in real work, and second, if I invest and train these individuals, you want to see those individuals actually contributing to your organization, as opposed to now that I'm a little bit faster, smarter, I want to go ask for more money, work for a competition. So that's why retention is another key factor in how organizations are measuring success. So I'm going to get to this in a moment. I'm going to talk a bit about training is one component. In your particular cases, this training is called education, but it's still a form of actually capturing information that will help you to apply it in future relevant cases in the so a lot of these so-called training scenarios, the line between is it training or is it education? So at this conference that I attended, there was a full track about virtual reality training for the enterprise, and there were people from these medical university, and they were giving examples how they are training nurses or doctors, and then they need access to a lab to apply this procedure, figure out how do you, I don't know, deal with an appendectomy, or somebody's bleeding and you want to stop the bleeding and stuff. But the amount of time allowed per students to those expensive classes is minimal. You get one training session as part of the class. If you want to book additional training, because that's obviously not enough to actually give you the practice to go from like, oh, okay, I kind of saw how it's happening, very different from actually I can do it myself. But the labs are booked for months. With virtual reality training, reproducing an environment once you create is basically no cost. And then the cost of these devices are coming down. So if I can just go home and I can put my devices on, and then I can get access to this lab anytime I want without any risk that I'm going to cut myself, there's going to be an infection or any, it definitely changes how these institutions are complemented the training they provide for the education they're providing for the students. So training and education spans across a number of areas. I'm listing some of them in here. One particular area is around soft skills. So what we're seeing in the organization we're working with, this idea of soft skills is about how do you have meaningful conversations. So somebody gets promoted, you've done a great job, you become a senior or whatever, and right now I'm going to make you a manager. Okay, so your job changes from personal success, your job, be an individual contributor, get these tasks done, to actually, oh, my success is measured on how I impact my team, how us as a group deliver. How do I have meaningful conversation? Who's doing a great job to recognize that person who is falling behind? And the fact that I send you a letter now I change your title from whatever senior marketer, senior designer, senior developer to whatever manager doesn't change who you are or in the knowledge you have. So how do we support, especially these, first-time manager, to go from individual contributors to becoming managers? So this is an example of soft skills training. Another example of soft skills training you work for a bank and you are a teller, and how do you provide customer service? Oh, most of the time it's really simple. You have your transactions, people come in, they wait in the lineup, and then you deal with them one at a time. Sometimes you may have an upset or irate customer. They are really frustrated about something. They feel like they have been, mistreated and so on, and they are very vocal. All right, that's like a high emotional interactions. Adrenaline go high on that part. That energy is transferred to you. How do you continue to stay professional and then handle that interaction efficiently? So that's another example of soft skills training. We saw this type of training applicable across all industries. From Walmart, giving example of how they onboard their employees, to, for example, travel and hospitality. So I'm going to introduce this concept. Stanford basically has done some research and then have come up with this acronym called DICE, which stands from dangerous, impossibly costly, and expensive. So what does that mean? They look into, hey, when we apply virtual reality training, and it happens to be one of these situations from the DICE acronym, the return on investment for VR training is increasing even more. So the example is from the travel and hospitality. I'm going to give you two examples. So from the perspective of being difficult to reproduce, these airlines are doing training for how to de-ice a plane. In Toronto, for example, probably in Halifax, it can get very cold in winter. It can snow. The wings, the engine can be very cold, can be freeze, and then not perform properly. So there is a de-icing procedure. Okay, so this particular company is based in Atlanta, and guess what? 360 days a year, it's not cold and it's not icy. So if I go to say somebody, okay, take the airplane, go to do some training, well, I can, because it's actually 20 degrees outside and there is no ice. So I need to rely on weather when that training is taking place. The other aspect is, okay, so it's hard to reproduce because the weather, I'm depending on the weather, an external factor. Second one, it means that I have to take a plane, put it somewhere on a isolated place on the tarmac, and then give people the chance to actually de-ice the plane with hot water and so on. Well, the airlines are in the business of flying people, and keeping that plane unused for hours is hours in which the plane is not making money. So I gave you an example in which not only this is expensive to keep the plane used for training exercises, but also it's already hard to reproduce because the weather conditions are, not something that we can control. A similar example is Air Canada when it's training their staff for doing emergency procedures for evacuation. And they need to deploy that chute, and then there are fires, the lights are off, and so on. So how do you create an immersive experience? It sounds like that. Your adrenaline is, you pumped up. So this is not like you reading a memo or an email. This is what you need to do when that happens, because that doesn't build the muscle memory. But also, as you can imagine, that's very expensive. You need to fly everyone to be on that particular location. You have these fires, these smokes, and so on. What if somebody touches somebody hot? And right now, you have an employee who was injured during that training. So these are examples in which those DICE scenarios apply and make the role of training even more relevant. How we develop training solutions, we work with partners like Unity, who, if you guys have played games and so on, there are two main engines to power these 3D worlds. One is Unity. The other one, we're using this partner, Motive.io, another Vancouver-based company who have a platform specifically built for training. So now what needs to happen is, it's almost kind of in the Netflix scenario. So all these channels that you subscribing to are moving away from, I don't know, I'm going to show you movies from Disney and other Sony and other producers, to building their own content. So that's how Aequilibrium is using this type of platforms to build custom scenarios for a training scenario for our clients. These are some examples of stories in which, in different domains, from insurance to, you know, big box retailers to banking, big organizations are using training to make a change in the life of their customers and their staff. We have built at Aequilibrium our own solution called Agile VR for improving collaboration for agile distributed teams. So when COVID hit, we figured out, oh, okay, we need to move to work remotely, and clients work remotely. The tenets about agile were like, well, people are meeting in person, everybody's, you know, dedicated to a project. We have a so-called war room in which the team will meet regularly to sort of discuss every day, to discuss the next steps, brainstorming about that particular project. Well, now everybody's remote, so all those tenets about how proper agile is supposed to be done are no longer possible. And we believe that these type of interactions, like using Microsoft or Zoom or Google Hangouts, Bill Gates calls this Hollywood squares, these faces in there on the big boxes and so on. So afar from, you know, replicating the in-person experience when we used to work together. So without further ado, let me provide a, let's see, how would I show you? All right, so I'm gonna start this and then pause it to see like, hey, what exactly are you seeing here? So for how many of you are familiar with the concept of agile development, which is adopted by most organizations right now? You have these agile teams which comes in every morning. They do these so-called agile sprints, and then they meet every morning to do the agile huddles. They come in person, they stay in a circle, we're looking at the board. This board looks like this. So you have what you see in there, tickets, you know, or work items, who does what work item, as that work item moves from like in progress to actually being developed to actually being done or in testing. So we look to see how we create a more accurate digital replica of those interactions now that the teams are working remotely. And basically we call this product Agile VR. And this can be used for any kind of group interactions. It can be in a classroom, it can be in a work environment, and it is meant to improve collaboration and creativity for these type of agile distributed teams. If you want to learn more about this, check out agilevr.com. So what you see in here, in this particular instance, we are doing a demo into one room. It obviously makes sense when people are actually remote. And then you'll see these people from logging in using their headsets to the experience that you see on the right side, in which while we physically dispersed, we will come together as being one team, one collocated team, looking at each other, interacting, and then having this type of behaviors that normally were taking place while we were working on that project together in person. So I have just a couple more slides. Now we're coming at the hour, and I want to give a bit of time for Q&A should you have some questions. The same way we mentioned training, there are similar initiatives taking place in terms of education. I actually attended the conference in which one of the professors who attended has a full class, full curriculum about teaching people XR. And not only about getting them ready to take on this project that are using XR in the future, but many of his classes are actually talking using virtual reality. So there are environments that you can immerse into, you can log into, and you can either attend in a much more engaging 3D experience using a headset, or you can use your computer screen to go and attend that environment. But obviously, when you move to this 2D environment on your computer screen, you're not as immersed into that classroom or training environment than you are should you put the 3D headset on. So to recap, my suggestions for you as students who are preparing to become enjoying the workforce of the future, think about the idea about how do you learn to upskill. So as opposed to I'm learning something today and then I will be asked that question, remember the answer, because it's more like learning how to learn. And then be open to new experiences, because how to become relevant in the future will continue to change. So for example, AI right now is democratizing access to knowledge. We move from, oh, you have computers. Well, you really need to be a savant. You need to basically know whatever querying languages to be able to get any information from the computer. That changed when Apple created the GUI, the graphic user interface, so anybody can click on buttons and then do these presentations. But now they move it into using conversational interfaces. You can, the same way you communicate with another person, you can communicate with the computer and ask the computer to do the work for you. So part of the challenge would be, who can ask the best questions for interfaces like ChatGPT? What's the problem to solve? And then how do you use ChatGPT or similar AI, interfaces to basically help you to do your job better? So we believe, for example, that digital and human will coexist, and technology like virtual reality and AI will enhance the type of work that we're doing. So instead of needing a team of 6, you may need a team of 2 to get the work done. So we may be chatting right now, we can be in a coffee shop, I take a napkin, I sketch something on it. So what you need to do, you need to hire a designer to take that sketch into a proper, template, maybe using Figma or other design skills. And then you have a developer to put that on a web. You need a web developer, you need somebody to deploy it. Right now, you can take a photo of that chicken scratches you had on the napkin, and then Figma would basically use AI to turn that scratch into an actual design, and then generate the code for you and publish that into a web page within minutes. So instead of having 3 or 4 people on your team with different level of expertise, that is becoming a commodity, and all of us can do that in a very short amount of time. So I'll pause here. This wraps up my presentation. If you have any questions, I'm happy to sort of spend the time and try to answer them.
Thank you very much, Adrian. Oh, I do hear some echo. I think that's a very fitting presentation for the last talk of the term, because in the class we focus mainly on the fin part and not so much on the tech part. And these insights into what the future workplace might look like, I think are very welcome, and also making us think. There was a question that Aaron asked, and then he kind of answered it himself, but I do want to bring it to your attention in case you want to comment any further. What do you believe will be the eventual adoption of VR? Will it become more like the fridge that is near 100% adoption, or will it be more like a dishwasher that is 50 to 70%? And then he said, please ignore the question. Thanks to the insights provided in the rest of the presentation, I think adoption may be closer to the fridge. Extremely interesting. So I wanted to bring that.
I think, it's like the adoption of the phone, right? For example, think about the so-called tap and pay, while Apple or Google had the so-called mobile wallets. the tap and pay didn't really take off until a giant like Apple introduced this near field communication interactions, because it made it worthwhile for retailers to modernize. Right now, putting something on your face, it's tricky. You know, Google tried that Google Glasses a while ago, and you're looking like a dork when you're wearing on. So as technology is evolving, what's going to happen is the cloud is going to come closer. So meaning that the horsepower, this processing power, will take place into the cloud. Right now, that latency is too far, and then you will literally have like normal whatever pilot glasses that have the ability to create these augmented experiences for you. So all that stuff in terms of like, I'm visiting Madrid and I want to get these walking tours, or it's a museum, or I want to try to find my next restaurant while avoiding whatever allergies I have. All this information will become available to us. The cost for these devices is going down. The Apple is anticipated to $3,500. That's for sure that not most individuals will buy that. That will be an industry type of device. But right now, everybody has one of these. And the next generation of device will include AI and augmented reality and virtual reality. So it's just a matter of timing. This gap between what's virtual reality device, what's augmented reality. Your phone's already providing augmented reality experiences. If you go to Amazon and search for a pair of shoes, and then, okay, when I choose these shoes, you look through a phone to your feet and you're gonna put those shoes on your feet. Oh, do they work with these jeans? Are they too high up on my ankles and so on? So these experiences are already becoming part of our lives. I bought my first pair of glasses online because most people are reluctant to do so, not because you have a bigger selection, it's cheaper to buy glasses online, but you didn't know how you're gonna look with the glasses on. Are they gonna fit you well? So now you can use this augmented reality experience when you choose those glasses on your computer screen. It's like, hey, put them on. How would I look like? Because since it's on your face, what you wear in your pocket and so on, nobody cares. But if it's on your face, it does matter how you look like. So that's an example in which, you know, XR, in particular, augmented reality, is already taking place in our lives.
I see Maktab has a question. Go ahead, Maktab.
Thank you, Mr. Adrian, for the really nice presentation. It was a beautifully designed slide, so it speaks to your winning the awards for UX. I have a two-part question. My first question is, you touched a little bit about using metaverse to integrate people into working together. Obviously, humans are very social creatures, and in my personal opinion, I prefer in-person meetings, and because it's just better. So how do you see VR tackling that piece of the context? And then secondly, what do you see is the biggest hurdle for this industry to propagate forward?
That's a great question. So in terms of our vision is about humans and digital coexisting, coming together. So as opposed to the Terminator movie in which AI and robots are taking the world, and then it's more like in the Matrix movie in which the machines and humans will coexist in its symbiosis. So if you can meet in person, by all means. Now, think about this particular class. How many of the people are actually coming into the office and meeting, you know, with the colleagues and the teacher every day, versus using the convenience to actually dial in remotely? So the fact you can do it, to meet remotely, it's going from saving lives to becoming a commodity. So any companies, when they start to tell people like Apple, or, you know, I'm talking about $1 trillion company like Google or Apple, come back home, come back into the office and so on, they had a big backlash. So remote work is here to stay. So is it valuable to meet in person? Absolutely. Now you can work for, you know, remote organization, but also for global organization in which you want to tap into a global pool of talent, as opposed to whomever is in Halifax. You know, you may have a specialist, you know, in Brazil, another person in Toronto, and so on. So as opposed to being limited to, you can meet in person, you want to have these interactions with the best people in the world for that particular topic. So the current screens, this type of interaction is so old school. it's just embarrassing, the fact that we still, like, it basically, it caught, you know, Google and Microsoft with the pants down when pandemic hit, because they didn't have a solution for remote work. And then companies like Zoom is like, we are the least worst of all the others, and then it became a unicorn and a multi-billion-dollar company. But their solutions are far for replicating the type of interactions we had in the past. And so that's the first part of the question. You know, by all means, if you can meet in person, I encourage you to do so. But it's going to be very different. You coming to the office to put the headphones on to work at your computer makes no sense. You might well stay home. So the offices will change to become, you know, stimulating this type of conversations and think about design thinking and, you know, creating culture, as opposed to I have an individual office in which I close my door and I put my headphones on and then work by myself. Then why come in the office? Why don't do it from home? So think about those examples from Adam Grant. What kind of work are you doing? And that may not be, if I join this company, I'm going to be doing this type of work. I'm a gymnast, or I'm doing a relay work, or I'm doing collaboration work. Because that may change from day to day and project to project. We may be working on different projects that fit in different categories. So for this one, you need to be in person. For this one, they haven't seen each other in person in 5 years. So this will continue to evolve and change. What was the second part of your question? Were you asking about the penetration? What was
Thank you for the first part answering that. I was asking, what do you see as the biggest hurdles that you have to overcome to like propagate in future to get a bigger industry or market?
So Facebook, for example, completely changed their name to Meta. Hey, the metaverse is happening. They hired tens of thousands of developers. They are betting on the metaverse, and there is this ups and downs, right? Because when they did a demo just over years ago of, you know, Facebook Horizon, the experience was unimpressive. People say, oh, it looks like the me characters from 10 years ago. So it's too little, too late. And then AI became the new kid on the block, and everybody jumped on that bandwagon and so on. Now we're seeing again XR coming up, especially with organization like Apple seeing like spatial computing is the next big thing. So is it again going to be a fad? When I was a student of your age, AI, we were discussing about AI at that time, and we were doing with expert systems, and really nothing really meaningful happened until a year ago when ChatGPT came in and then democratized access to AI through these conversational interfaces. So question is differentiated between, is this a fad or is this actually here to stay? I believe that both AI and XR will be disruptive technologies. In particular, something like AI right now, given the adoption, the feeling are between early adopters to late adopters. If you don't jump on the bandwagon early on, you're going to be left behind and then you become irrelevant. So,
there are a few questions in the chat, Adrian, that I would also like you to get to, and then I will go to Lucas, who has a question verbally. So the next one that was in the chat is from SD. The adoption strategy for VR would be dependent on pricing. How do you think Apple and other meta companies are going to become the full stream providers of VR in the strategic run?
Yeah, so if you think about when Tesla changed the world, by bringing in the electric car, they didn't think about themselves. I'm a car company. I'm a technology company that focuses on transportation. And right now, you either have an electric future or you're out. So, and they didn't launch with a cheap device. Tesla S, which their first car, was over $150,000 Canadian. So their launch strategy, like Apple, wasn't, Apple Vision Pro is a $3,500, certainly not for the mass adoption, but they're looking into like, we will start with the organization, with companies, and through them, we're gonna make a change in the industry. While for consumers, you have devices like Oculus, $250 for the launch of Oculus 3, that's amazing value. If you use that as a replacing for your gaming console, that's better value than actually getting a console. So definitely they're going towards, like, if you're looking for entertainment, price is coming down. It's always guarantees, like, you know, you'll get always more value, better ROI for your money with every year. So the other aspect that I mentioned to you in terms of not only the headset, you want the cloud, the computational power to basically be available with little latency. So when that happens, the magic thing is that your headset will become thinner, because the future would be your headset will look like your actual glasses today, because it's just a small screen that projects directly on your retina, and all the computational power and then the need for batteries happening into the cloud. So,
Adrian, I think you also addressed the next one, but I do want to mention it. It's continuing kind of the same line of thought from Tyler, mentioning Google Glass. What do you think the adoption of technologies that like this will be as they become more advanced compared to VR headsets? I recently saw that Ray-Ban created a new sunglasses with Bluetooth features, allowing for music and phone calls. Will this technology continue to develop?
Yeah, it's about understanding the market. The Google Glass is too early. The other thing is they didn't understand the experience. Right? People who put stuff on their faces that look like dorks. So it wasn't a matter of technology. It was like, remember those videos with the people taking showers while wearing the Google glasses? Is like, that was not the message that wanted to be. So people didn't understand there is a difference between, if I have a phone, what I hold in my pocket, doesn't matter how it looks. But when I put something on my face, I make a statement. And if that stuff makes me look ridiculous, even if there is some cool technology to it, it's like it will be a definite flop. So at Aequilibrium, we start with the idea of like experience is the product and technology is the enabler. So when Meta partnered with Ray-Ban and they have these new glasses that are doing augmented reality, they start with Ray-Ban is a leader and they understand what people expect to have on their faces and then how technology can augment that, as opposed to, I'm a technology company and an engineer has decided to put some stubby stuff on my face. It's like, that's not gonna fly.
And that also brings another interesting angle. He says, do you feel like the metaverse and or adopting something similar at work may negatively harm people's physical and mental health since they'll most likely stay enclosed in this virtual reality?
There is always, you know, pros and cons for, you know, when you have a technology, you can use it for good or for bad. But for example, people rehabilitation can be accelerated because you create environments that are conducive for healing so there is both for mental wellness and for patients to recover from trauma and so on. You create these tailored experiences that, you know, can have dramatic impact in improving the well-being of humans. So that's an example. Sure, you know, with video games, some people may have a negative reactions, even in VR, for example, when you learn to navigate, right? Some people may feel uncomfortable at the beginning. I think this type of getting used to wearing devices, including keeping something on your head for several hours, it's a matter that can be surpassed over time. Sure, there may be a group of people who react less well to this type of interactions. When you start a video game on your TV, sometimes they have that disclaimer, oh, some stroboscopic effect, a very small number of people may be negatively affected and so on. If that's the case, don't use it. How many people really, you know, are affected to that level in which they don't play those video games because of that particular reason? So I think we can overcome these challenges and then go from actually can they affect us to actually have beneficials. Now, like everything, again, technology used for good or for bad. So if you are in this metaverse, you can have actors that are not behaving, and then what about abuse? What about people, you know, using these environments for, you know, bad business and so on? So sure, there is this idea, like the same way you are looking to regulate or basically manage this type of interactions. You heard about Twitter and Facebook and so on. Imagine when you have these interactive 3D experiences on the metaverse, the whole thing about, you know, how do you limit this type of offensive behaviors? How do you flag and so on will have to be resolved.
There are a few more questions. I want to move to a verbal question. Go ahead, Lucas.
So I kind of had a two-part question, but one of them was pretty well related to the question that was just answered about people like getting less exercise if they can do so many of their outdoor activities, just on their couch at home. But my second question was about data privacy. We talk about that a lot in this class, and it wouldn't have been something that really occurred to me, but I started doing some research once we started talking about VR because it's super interesting. And they can collect data like biometric data and behavioral analytics, which I think would be a pretty big concern to some people. So I was wondering if you had any information on how that's going to be addressed and regulated.
That's an excellent question. The amount of data you can acquire from the metaverse, given these interactions, would be n times than whatever you think you're doing on your phone. I'm looking at a website, they may track where my eyes are, they get a sense of where I hover with my mouse. Here, you are in the metaverse, you have way more. These devices, I'm not sure if you're aware, but they track your eye. So what makes them interesting is to go from those poker face avatars to actually, I can see you smiling, you have a facial expression. So that's why what makes this interaction much more relevant, because as technology advance, these cameras are tracking me, not only they're using where my eyes are focusing, but also they're tracking my face. Am I smiling? Am I upset? And so on. So this avatar will, instead of having that poker face from a year ago, now they actually can show you like how do you actually react. That's not an information that your phone has or your web browsing. So as you indicated, the amount of information that becomes available is increasing exponentially. So similar companies, the same way Apple said, like, you have to be very specific in terms of what information you're collecting. And now every time you open a mobile app on your Apple phone for the first time, Apple is forcing all its providers to say, allow people to track or record this data and so on. So in the end, this idea about if you use this data wisely, you can have personalized experiences, and the level of comfort for people is different. And then the other one, it can be if you don't use it properly, then it becomes creepy. So it's not different from what's already happening now. It's just the volume of data available will be increased dramatically.
And Vivek Kumar had a similar question, so I think you answered that. We are at the time, but yeah. I want two quick, fast questions. Continuing this, do you think there should be an age limit for children or young people using this technology?
Yeah, I'm going to leave that to regulators and so on. So it's like video games and so on. So sure, depending on type of content, rated and so on, it can be amazing experiences. Remember when we started to create experience, or like Nintendo about learn how to be a surgeon, or like from games to basically shoot monsters and so on, or violent games to actually level up your brain. So there are different types of experiences. This idea about content moderation, even when you open your phone and you watch Netflix, you may put some parental controls who can watch what type of content. So again, this is just another screen, another type of content. The questions that were asked in the past will apply now. We can learn from those lessons, and there are governments and companies who will figure out how to come together to address this, but it's not a new questions.
Do you happen to know the name of that device that you said allows to smell fresh goods or roasted coffee in virtual reality? One of the students was wondering.
I'll follow up and send that information. So there are some cartridges, right? And that you put in, and the same way you use, those 3 primary colors to generate the whole color spectrum. You have this type of, primary senses, and then you can generate an array of smells. So this is walking into the forest, or this is basically, in a coffee shop or so on. So you can buy those type of cartridges. Typically, it's associated with the type of sensations you can produce. One can be, remember, we had an actual project. It was called Move from Screen Time to Green Time, to actually go into the forest and experience forest, which has beneficial effects for your well-being. Imagine you do that virtually, and then you also get to smell the pines or whatever, the forest or so on.
Adrian, do you have time for a last question? Promise, last one.
Sure. I have the time, so I have more.
We are over time, and I know students, many of them had to go, but metaverse would require tons of GPU power. What role could cloud GPU computing play in it?
Yeah, so like artificial intelligence, oh, I can ask Google something, or I ask some ChatGPT something, and you consume 10x the amounts of horsepower and CO2 is being produced and so on. Sure, reality is cloud and technology is going to become cheaper and cheaper. And if we choose to invest in this, XR can be a massive consumption of cloud and CPU power. These environments, these worlds that people are already playing these games, right, online, and there are multiverse worlds and have millions of users. So it's already this three-dimensional interactive experience are taking place. They are associated right now with gaming and education. You can be like going to the mall. It can be better than just shopping on Amazon.com interdimensional. It can be like a shopping experience, including like I'm meeting with my friends when I'm doing this. So it can become a social experience, because I see a lot of kids, for example, at the mall and using the mall as a way to actually get together as an excuse or a venue. They can do that in 3D. So it is, I anticipate that the consumption of technology power will increase dramatically through the needs of these type of worlds. But we already know there are these type of worlds through these verse games that are taking place, and is this like is gonna happen at a different scale? And the organization who started to sell land, you pay real money to buy virtual land into these worlds, and you can start putting, oh, if this is downtown, this piece of virtual real estate is more expensive than something that's further out. And then companies are already, so people have spent hundreds of million dollars, real dollars, to buy virtual reality property.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Adrian. We are over time. We really, really appreciated all the insights. Thank you very much. Next time, hopefully you can come to us in virtual reality. I still have that dream that one day we'll be able to do that. Thank you to everyone for your attention. Enjoy your break week, and I'll see you when you come back. And enjoy the long weekend, Adrian, Maxim, and everyone.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you today. Hope you have taken some good learnings, and I'm available if you want to follow up afterwards to continue answering your questions. Have a great weekend, everyone.
And I assume they can find you on LinkedIn, right, Adrian?
They can, and then you can pass my contact information afterwards. I will follow up with you to answer that questions about the cartridges for.
Sure.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye now.